Good, good morning. Please state your name for the record.
Stephen Testasecca.
Mr. Testasecca, where are you employed?
I'm self-employed.
What type of work do you do?
Window and door replacement.
Are you married?
Yes, ma'am.
What is your wife's name?
Melanie.
Do you live in Fort Myers?
No, ma'am.
What city do you live in?
Lakeland.
There's a phone call that no parent ever wants to receive. But when Stephen Testasecca's phone rang that October evening in 2019, what he heard on the other end would force him to make an impossible choice between protecting his son and preventing more deaths.
Oh,
How are they known?
they went to church with Wade's mother's parents.
So that was how they connected and ended up raising Wade Wilson.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, do they have any other children?
Yes, ma'am. 2 daughters.
And have you spoken with them on numerous occasions?
I've spoken with Candy.
And that
This is a story of confession that revealed the darkest corners of human capability, delivered not to police, but to a father who'd only known his son for 7 years. Stephen Testasecca met his biological son, Wade Wilson, when Wade was already 18 years old. Stephen had been just 14 when Wade was born, a child himself, far too young to be a parent. Wade was given up for adoption, raised by another family 2 hours away in Tallahassee. When Wade finally reached out as a young adult, Stephen wanted to build a relationship they'd never had. But what began as reconciliation slowly transformed into something else entirely. The calls became sporadic, unpredictable. Sometimes Wade would reach out every other day, then 6 months of silence. When he did call, it was usually the same request, money. But on Monday, October 7th, when Wade's name appeared on Stephen's phone screen, the ask was different. He said he needed help. He'd done something he couldn't take back. Stephen was at work, replacing windows and doors, unable to give his full attention to whatever crisis his son was describing. Wade mentioned an argument with his girlfriend, someone Stephen knew only as Milo. It sounded like another one of Wade's dramas, another chaotic situation that would blow over. Stephen told him to call back around dinner time, when he could focus. He had no idea that while they were speaking, detectives were already searching for his son. The detectives' call came before Wade could call back. They were looking for Wade Wilson. They needed to speak with him urgently. When Stephen's phone finally rang again that evening, Wade's tone had shifted. He told his father that 2 people wouldn't be coming back. He said, simply and directly, "I'm a killer." Stephen didn't believe him. Wade was, in his father's words, a good storyteller. This felt like another fabrication, another bid for attention or money wrapped in dramatic language. So Stephen asked him to call back later, still not taking the claim seriously. But when the phone rang the 3rd time, around 10 that night, Stephen had put it on speaker. His wife Melanie sat beside him. What they heard next would shatter any remaining doubt. Wade began with the first woman. He'd met her at a bar earlier that day. They'd gone back to her house, spent some time together. She fell asleep. That's when Wade got on top of her and strangled her. He used crude, derogatory language as he described it. "I choked that bitch," he told his father. No hesitation, no remorse in his voice. He said he stayed in the house for a while afterward, that he tried to roll her body into the trunk of her car, but couldn't lift her. He claimed rigor mortis had already begun, making her body too stiff to move. So he left her there in her home and took her car instead. Stephen and Melanie listened frozen, as Wade's voice remained excited, almost animated, as though he wanted them to feel what he was feeling. Then came the second victim. Wade described seeing a woman walking down the street. He pulled over, asked her for directions. She got into the car, into the dead woman's stolen car. As he drove, he reached over and strangled her too, killing her while he was behind the wheel. But unlike the first murder, this one had a horrifying epilogue. When he stopped to dispose of her body, he realized she was still breathing. So he got back in the car and ran over her. Not once, not twice. He told his father he kept running her over until, in his words, she looked like spaghetti. The detail was delivered with the same disturbing excitement, the same pride that had colored his description of the first murder. He seemed to want validation, wanted his father to understand the power he'd felt. Stephen would later testify that his son showed no remorse whatsoever during this confession. The man on the phone was animated, proud, pleased with what he'd accomplished. Wade even expressed confidence that the second victim wouldn't be found, that he'd hidden her well enough to avoid discovery. As Stephen listened to these details, the mechanics of strangulation, the premeditation of disposing of bodies, the running calculation of whether he'd left evidence, something fundamental shifted in him. He'd wanted to help his son. That paternal instinct had been strong even just hours earlier. But now, sitting with his wife, hearing Wade describe two brutal murders with excitement rather than horror, Stephen thought about something else. What if that was my mom? My daughter? My sister? My wife? And then another thought, darker and more urgent. If I don't turn him in, he'll do it again. Stephen told Wade he'd send an Uber to pick him up, help him get somewhere safe. He just needed the address. Wade, trusting his father, gave it to him. He had no idea that Melanie was already messaging with law enforcement, relaying every detail her husband was hearing. As detectives closed in on the address Wade had provided, Stephen stayed on the phone with his son. When police arrived at the house where Wade had been hiding after breaking in during his flight from authorities, Stephen urged him to surrender peacefully. He did want Wade to do anything that would get him killed in a confrontation with law enforcement. Put your hands up, he told him. Just go outside. And Wade Wilson did. The bodies told the full story that Wade's excited confession had outlined. 35-year-old Kristine Melton was found strangled in her bed, killed in the early morning hours after what should have been a normal night out. She met Wade at a bar, brought him home, and fallen asleep, never knowing that the man in her home would take her life for no reason she could have anticipated. 43-year-old Diane Ruiz, a mother of two and a bartender, was found days later in a field. She'd simply been walking down a street when Wade pulled over and asked for directions. She got into the car to help. Her body bore the evidence of being strangled, beaten, pushed from a vehicle, and run over repeatedly, between 10 and 20 times, according to investigators. Vultures had already found her before searchers did. When Wade Wilson's trial began in June 2024, Stephen Testasecca took the stand and testified about those phone calls. He told the jury about his son's excitement, his lack of remorse, his desire to share these murders as though they were accomplishments. The courtroom heard the clinical details, the medical examiner's findings, the timeline of violence, the calculated nature of the second murder after the first. But they also heard something else, the voice of a father who'd chosen to help stop his son rather than protect him. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes before recommending death sentences for both murders, 9 out of 12 jurors for Kristine Melton's murder, 10 out of 12 for Diane Ruiz. Under Florida's controversial new death penalty law, which eliminated the requirement for unanimous jury recommendations, those numbers were more than enough. In August 2024, Judge Nicholas Thompson imposed both death sentences, stating that the evidence showed the murders were heinous, atrocious, and cruel, and that the second murder was cold, calculated, and premeditated. Wade Wilson showed no emotion as the sentence was read. His adoptive parents had written a letter pleading for mercy, describing the joyful child they'd raised, blaming the system that failed to address his drug addiction. But the prosecutors stood firm. State Attorney Amira Fox addressed the disturbing reality that had emerged during the case. Wade Wilson had developed a following. People were fundraising for him, sending supportive messages, treating him like some kind of icon because he shared a name with a Marvel character. Fox was unequivocal in her response. This man is no idol. He is, she said, nothing more than a vicious killer and one of the poorest representations of humanity imaginable. The case raises questions that linger long after the verdict. What creates a person capable of such violence, such complete absence of empathy? Was it the brain damage that defense experts claim to find in scans? The drug addiction his adoptive parents cited? Or something darker, something that existed independent of any injury or substance? And what about Stephen Testasecca, the biological father who'd only known his son for 7 years before making the choice to turn him in? He wanted a relationship, wanted to be the father he couldn't be at 14. Instead, he became the person who ensured his son would face the ultimate punishment for crimes that had no rational explanation. Wade Wilson is now on Florida's death row, his case under appeal, his face marked with tattoos he added while awaiting trial, including swastikas and a stitched smile reminiscent of the Joker. He's become an internet curiosity, a source of morbid fascination, precisely what the victims' families never wanted. Kristine Melton's brother told reporters he doesn't understand the social media tension, the TikTok posts, the strange celebrity that's grown around someone who destroyed 2 lives for reasons he couldn't even explain. 2 wonderful people died, he said. This should not end up being about Wade. But it is about Wade, in the end. Not because he deserves attention, but because understanding what happened requires grappling with the person who caused it. A man who called his father to confess not out of guilt, but seemingly out of pride, who described murders with excitement rather than horror, who, when arrested and asked if he would do it again, didn't hesitate to say yes. The phone call that Stephen Testasecca received that October evening wasn't just a confession. It was a window into something most of us will never comprehend, a mind that crossed a line so completely that killing 2 strangers in the span of hours felt like something worth celebrating. What does it mean when someone confesses not for forgiveness, but for recognition, when the person who stops a killer has to be their own father? This case offers no comfortable answers, only the stark reality of 2 women whose lives were stolen and the impossible choices left in the aftermath. If this story affected you, if it made you think about the nature of evil, the limits of redemption, or what justice actually means, share your thoughts in the comment below. And if you believe cases like this deserve serious, respectful examination, subscribe to this channel. These are stories that need to be told, not because they're entertaining, but because they're true.